Over the past few years, we began to see sort of a renaissance for handheld gaming. From dedicated emulation devices to portable PCs and consoles, handheld gaming fans have been spoiled rotten. It seems like every couple of months, a new company declares their attempt to break into this market, with the latest being Razer in partnership with Verizon Wireless and the Razer Edge 5G. This device has some pretty respectable specs and a portable setup that makes traveling with it pretty easy. But starting at $400 and $600 for the 5G model that I have, is it a good enough experience to justify the price? Hello world and all who inhabit it, it is I, the Great Sayran, and the Razer Edge 5G is $600. Keep that in mind as we continue to talk about this thing. I don't think it's bad or doesn't do everything it's supposed to do. In fact, there's a lot I like about this thing. I love mobile gaming. I live a busy life and don't always have my console or PC available to access games. Consoles like the Switch fit perfectly into my life. It's small enough to fit into a bag when traveling, it's powerful enough to play games I'm actually interested in, and the build quality and gaming experiences are up to par with dedicated console gaming, so it doesn't feel like I'm giving up much for portability. The Razer Edge actually ticks off a lot of these as well. It's a beast on paper, starting with the specs. This thing is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon G3X Gen 1. I used to keep up with Qualcomm's chipset, but now it's like, meh, it's faster than last year. My model has 8GB of LPDDR5 RAM, while the base model comes with 6. Either way, it's pretty good for a dedicated gaming device like this one. Storage is kind of disappointing at 128 gigs, but there's a micro SD slot for expandable memory up to 2 TB. After Apex Legends Mobile, Call of Duty Mobile, Genshin Impact, and just a few other games, I had already used up over half my storage, and that's before ROMs. It does have 2 speakers and 2 mics with Verizon adaptive sound. I used to work there and still have no idea what that even is. There's also a useless front-facing 5-megapixel 1080p 60fps camera. Not only is that useless specifically on this device, but it's also bad. Getting a decent camera on a cheap device isn't impossible anymore, not that you'd actually use the camera on this thing. Battery is pretty good on a portable device like this one that usually translates to pretty okay for a dedicated gaming device. The actual charge lasted long enough, but charging it back up from 20% took about 2 hours. Safe to say there is no fast charging implementation here. Connectivity is your standard Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and Type-C, but this device specifically has 5G connectivity. I don't know how many times you'll be in a situation where you'll need it, but I'm sure over time it'd be handy. This is actually a feature I want Nintendo to implement in the next Switch to scratch that gimmick itch. Also, this thing has a headphone jack. I think with the mass access of Bluetooth headphones, this wouldn't be too big of a deal, but I'm glad it's here. The tablet isn't all that heavy, and longer gaming sessions don't wear on the hands thanks to the ergonomic design of these controllers, which I'll go into later. This thing also has some really cool haptics that feel great when emulating console games that use that feature, like Smash Melee or Mario Kart Double Dash. I'm actually quite impressed with the spec sheet. These are things you'd expect in a flagship phone, and even though some parts of it I find unnecessary, it's not half bad. Now let's get into the actual build of this thing. It's Razer, so we expect quality. Let's start with the tablet. I usually don't care about Android on tablets, but they implemented it well. This isn't a phone, but it does run the latest version of Android like one. Everything can be accessed via touch, and sometimes the controller's port will take over and give you a more immersive experience. I wish they would have done like the Logitech G Cloud and put a front end on it so that it feels more like a console, but this will do. You can always do that on the back end, but 99% of people grabbing this thing probably won't bother. The tablet is shorter and not as wide as my Switch OLED, but once the controllers are attached, it's actually longer. This is because of the ergonomic grips, and I'm excited to see more and more companies showing Nintendo you can have portable and comfortable controllers, something I hope they'll pay attention to with their next console. This tablet has separate volume up and down buttons and a power button, unlabeled of course to keep that sleek minimalistic design. It also has 2 microphones on the top and bottom. I really don't know what these will be used for, but I'm sure they're useful. Maybe in-game voice chat? People use that on mobile. There's also an SD card reader on the bottom that must be accessed with a SIM tool. This is pretty annoying because most people don't have one of these, and mine didn't come with one. I have one I keep on my keychain, but I'm a strange individual. Speaking of what all came with this device, the box had some pretty good padding, the tablet, the controller, some stickers, and a 45-watt charging brick and cable. There are 2 speakers that get decently loud by themselves, and it does help that they get routed through the controller. The controller really is the highlight of this experience to me, and I'm glad you can grab it separately. At first I was comparing it to the Backbone, which I use almost daily with my iPhone, but after a few sessions I realized that the Kishi Pro V2 was actually better. The face buttons and sticks are pretty much identical. Shallow sticks that are about as shallow as the Nintendo Switches, clicky buttons without much travel, and a D-pad, but I like the Kishi's D-pad better. It's clicky and not as mushy, so you get a more accurate input. I usually don't care about D-pads on mobile controllers since most games don't use them as often, but they're there. The overall build is more ergonomic on the Kishi than the Backbone. My favorite thing being the 2 remappable buttons on the top next to the shoulder buttons. This is really cool since you can't comfortably put back buttons on a mobile controller. I love this feature and I'd make this my go-to controller if the triggers weren't so sensitive. I find myself normally holding the controller and activating the triggers. I have a lot of controllers and use this controller's direct competition daily and never have had this problem. I find myself actively thinking about holding the controller a different way just to play games like Mega Man Network Transmission, and that just takes away from the immersion. Overall, the build is pretty solid. There's not a lot of flex and creep to this thing, and it feels like a solid piece even though the controller is detachable. With my backbone, I can feel it rickety in my hands, and sometimes the switch will let you know it's 3 separate pieces. I think they nailed the build quality since this tablet was specifically made for this controller. I don't know how similar of an experience you'll get if you grab the controllers separately. Now, when it comes to performance, this thing is a monster. It has a dedicated cooling system with fans you'll often hear kick up trying to cool down this thing.
So I'm sitting here downloading Genshin Impact, and we all know that's a hefty game, but listen to these fans. They are kicking. Good God.
I've tried all sorts of games with high refresh rates and high graphical settings and it didn't stutter. It's weird how so many games I test on iOS have mobile controller support that just don't on Android, like Genshin Impact or Apex Legends Mobile. It was pretty tough to find a super intensive game to push this thing to its limits that I would have liked. Yes, I can play with touch, but that's not why someone would buy this. This is Qualcomm's newest chipset, so we assume it can play Genshin Impact, a 3-year-old game. Since mobile games were letting me down, I decided to switch over to some GameCube emulation with Dolphin. I wasn't expecting to have any trouble, but the results were better than I expected. I'm not an emulation guru, but all the games I tested ran great, from Mario Kart Double Dash to Mega Man Network Transmission to Super Smash Bros. Melee, which can be notoriously difficult to emulate. The rumble in these games translate over well to the Razer Edge and create a really fun experience whether or not you have immense nostalgia for this system. Game Boy was also easy enough and there weren't many hiccups. I would have tried PSP and PS2, but I stopped myself because 1, this isn't an emulation video, and 2, if I wanted a dedicated emulation device running Android, I could find one for literally half the price. Literally. There are other cheaper devices that can scratch this itch as well, like the crowd favorite Steam Deck that everyone immediately compared this system to. It's cheaper, more powerful, and you can play a lot more with it. For the price of the Razer Edge 5G, you can get a Steam Deck, a dock, and a terabyte micro SD card. You can even buy the Kishi Pro V2 or the Backbone for $100, connect that to your phone, and have the exact same experience. I did try some cloud gaming with PS Remote Play and Game Pass. I tried testing latency with Hi-Fi Rush, a game super dependent on timing, and couldn't even finish the level. I don't think it's the internet because these are the speeds. It may be that the server was crowded on this game, but cloud gaming just wasn't it with Wi-Fi, so I expect worse performance from 5G. I'm having a hard time seeing who this is for. I see that a lot of the gripes with mobile gaming is having to attach a controller and having one less device since your phone is now being used to play a game. If you want a separate gaming device specifically for mobile that's extremely high quality, then I can recommend this, but even then the competition in this space have a lower cost of entry without giving up that much comparatively. I think Razer did a great job with the build quality. The specs are amazing and that translates well to performance. It's the price that's holding me back from encouraging people to pick this up. Even the base model at $400 can be argued against with a Steam Deck or an Iron Odin or even a Nintendo Switch OLED plus a used game. I'm excited companies are heading into this space, but without any software or gaming subscriptions to sell to make up the extra revenue, they have to put it all in their device and charge a very unattractive price. Save yourself a few bucks and skip the Razer Edge. The controller's pretty cool though. For more reviews of games and gaming products, be sure to check out my video on the Backbone. I really like this thing. Also, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.